Selamat siang, welcome back to another Bali COVID-19 update, and this is for October 24th, 2021. My name is Bruce. First, I appreciate all the comments and likes and subscribe. Thank you. There's a lot today, nothing particularly new about the reopening of Bali for the 19 countries. There's a couple of things, but just not any big movement in that right now. Things are pretty much the same as they were in Wednesday's video, with an exception or two. Let's get started with the numbers first, which are still looking good, by the way. The numbers are looking good. The 7-day average for positive cases, 32. And 7-day average for deaths, 2. Both down. So, more good news. Yesterday, new positive cases around Indonesia, 802, and deaths, 23. It's really amazing how far we've come since July. Yesterday in Indonesia, 161,864 tests and 0.50 positivity rate, and the 7-day average for positivity rate, 0.49%. And what about Bali? Bali tested 41,719 individuals over the last 7 days with a 7-day positivity rate of 0.56%. What about vaccination numbers? In Bali, 3,402,396 first doses, that's 76.2% of the population. And remember, that's the total population, not the target population. And second dose, 2,913,013. 65.2% of the population. So when we think about those numbers, just to remind you, the numbers seem to be moving slowly because we're getting up there. When we take a look at these numbers, we say, well, why aren't they the same as the numbers the government's giving? Because they're using target numbers, and this is total population, which is what you need to do if you're looking at herd immunity, for example. Because kids can get sick. They can get sick, they can catch the virus, and they can pass the virus on. But at this point, they can't be vaccinated. So that's a good part of the population that are not going to be vaccinated in the near future. And what about the Bali numbers? New positive cases, 23. Recoveries, 39. And deaths, unfortunately, 3. Active cases in Bali, 412. So overall, numbers are looking great. Does that mean that this is over? No, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. And according to the Minister of Finance, Sri Mulyani, beware of rising COVID-19 cases. Sri Mulyani worried about trending holidays again. And so our finance minister said COVID-19 cases in Indonesia are decreasing, but learning from various countries, cases may then increase again, especially if the vaccination effect has started to decrease over time, right? And that's something that people are worried about. How long is this going to be effective for? And what about booster shots? Okay, that's a question that is going to have to be addressed. We're still working on vaccinating the entire country, but question about booster shots. So she said, we have to worry about that and see how effective the vaccination is as we go over time. And additionally, Ibu Mulyani said that the implementation of new normal activities has begun both in schools, markets, office activities, and tourism, and she said this raises the possibility of an increase in cases that might happen again, and that includes, she said, the holidays coming up, which could cause people to increase their mobility. That usually increases the number of new cases. And as all government authorities, officials have said, she hopes that people continue to carry out and comply with health protocols when doing their activities. The numbers are looking good. What about vaccines and vaccinations? It seems like vaccinations have slowed down some. Here's something interesting. Indonesia to ask Merck for local production of Molnupiravir. What is Molnupiravir? Well, it's a antiviral treatment for COVID-19, and the government, a top-level team, is or was in the United States talking with the pharmaceutical company Merck about the possibility of manufacturing it in Indonesia. Who is there? Well, the Minister of Health and Chief Investment Minister Pak Luhut. According to Pak Luhut, we want to go beyond being a mere buyer. We expect them to have investment and production facilities in Indonesia, and we're going to meet them in New York on Wednesday. So that was earlier this week. Merck is currently seeking emergency authorization use for this drug from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, and the pill has been heralded as a game changer after a phase 3 trial showed it could reduce the risk of severe symptoms and deaths by 50%. Now, this is not going to take place of vaccines, but it can be coupled with the vaccine. And according to Indonesia's health minister, once we can couple vaccines with effective medication, we expect to accelerate the transition of the pandemic into an endemic. And according to the health minister, Pak Budi, the government is appealing to companies producing new antibody drugs for clinical trial use in Indonesia. So this would be excellent if we could become a production facility for these drugs. The weather here has been incredibly hot. Incredibly hot. And so this article, officials explain the recent extreme heat in Bali. So officials from the Denpasar Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysics have explained the recent heat wave in Bali. According to the coordinator of Denpasar BMKG Data and Information, Tiga Dwi Hartanto, this is caused by the position of the sun in October and November. The annual position of the sun on these days is directly above Bali and the southern areas of the earth, according to Hartanto. And he said this phenomenon causes affected areas to have a higher intensity of sunlight as well as higher humidity levels, which makes it feel hotter than normal. He added most of the regions on the southern part of the equator, such as Bali and Nusa Tenggara, will have higher temperatures and humidity levels. The highest temperatures could reach around 30 to 34% midday, and it was 32 here yesterday. And last night in my room, even with the air conditioner on, it took hours before it got down to 28. So yeah, it is hot. Hartanto said people should protect their skin from the scorching sun and keep their body hydrated during this period, and that's by consuming water and fruits, as well as protecting skin from direct sunlight by applying sunscreen when doing outdoor activities. Hartanto noted that the historical data for the period October to November shows a maximum air temperature in Bali generally in the range of 31 to 33. So it's not any hotter than normal, or than normal annually, but it's hotter than it has been recently. So this is one of the hottest parts of the year, and I explained this myself, not being a meteorologist, as before the rainy season starts, it always gets hot here. And an interesting thing, I love when people say this, the public is advised not to panic about the hot atmosphere, but still maintain health and stamina so that dehydration and skin irritation does not occur. I love it when the officials tell people not to panic. Okay, so it is hot. It is hot. So if you're here and out and around, wear sunscreen, keep hydrated, and it's going to be uncomfortable wearing a mask, unfortunately. Let's take a look around Asia and Australia and see what's happening there. And let's start first with Thailand, which is going to be the biggest competitor for tourist numbers with Bali, I think. Thailand seems to be bent on getting a head start. And what do we have? Test and go. Quarantine-free Thailand reopening for vaccinated tourists from 1 November 2021. The Tourism Authority of Thailand has announced that starting on November 1st, fully vaccinated tourists from selected countries will be allowed to enter Thailand quarantine-free. Well, and there's just a slight little pop about the quarantine-free, and we'll get to that in a minute. In this article, listed below, of course, things are spelled out pretty clearly, something that, well, Indonesia could take a hint from. So we start out with travel by air from approved countries, and there is a long list of approved countries. And what are they? Australia, Austria, Bahrain, Belgium, Bhutan, Brunei, Darussalam, Bulgaria, Cambodia, Canada, Chile, China, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Iceland, Ireland, Israel, Italy, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, Malaysia, Malta, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Portugal, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, Slovenia, South Korea, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, UAE, UK, USA, and Hong Kong. Notice Indonesia's not on that list. And this is very nice and something that Indonesia could clarify. Must have been in the approved countries for 21 days or more. And you need a certificate of entry or proof of registration for entry Thailand via specified platform. And you can download the platform online. A medical certificate with an RT-PCR lab test result indicating that COVID-19 has not been detected and issued no more than 72 hours before traveling. A medical certificate of recovery is required if you've had COVID-19. You need to have an insurance policy that is clearly identified as being no less than 50,000 US dollars. Payment confirmation for no less than one night stay upon arrival at the approved quarantine facilities. What? I thought this was no quarantine. Well, it's not in the sense that you have to stay somewhere for 5 days or 7 days or 14 days. So you're going to have to stay in an approved quarantine facility for 1 day, or 0 to 1 days it says, until you get the results of your test. And you're going to need to take the PCR test and an antigen test kit, ATK. Once that comes back negative, bingo, you're free to go. You need to have a certificate of vaccination. You have to undergo entry screening on arrival and present all required documents to the officials. And after that, you will proceed to airport transfer to the prearranged COVID-19 test center or the reserved accommodation and undergo the required test. Travelers must download and install the specified alert application and must wait within the accommodation only for the test result, which should be available within the day. You can't actually get out of the airport and go wherever you want to. You're going to have to go to a quarantine facility and wait to get a negative test result. But still, big deal. It says should be available within the day. And you have to pay for all this in advance. Looks pretty good. Looks pretty simple. And what about if you're not from one of the approved countries? Well, from sandbox to business and leisure, ultimate experiences, blue zone. So it says Thailand continues to welcome fully vaccinated visitors from countries not on the list under relaxed requirements. Travelers are welcome to choose from 17 blue zone destinations, up from currently 4 sandbox destinations, for their first 7-night mandatory stay within the destination before being able to move on to other parts of Thailand. They're welcoming everybody. So if you're not from an approved country, you can still come. You're going to have to do 7-day quarantine. So Thailand looks pretty good here in terms of being set to go, and that's for November 1st. Are there flights booked for Thailand starting on November 1st? I'm not sure. If you are a person that wants to go to Thailand, let me know. Make a comment down below, please. What about Australian tourists coming to Bali? Couple of articles today. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on in Australia the last few days. Been getting lots of comments. Thank you, with new updated information from people in Australia. And here's one from earlier in the week. Indonesian Tourism Minister said Bali is ready for Australian tourists. So our old friend Pak Sandiaga Uno says his message to the Australian government is that Indonesia has taken the right steps to welcome back tourists. He said, please be guided by data. We are here and we are ready. He said Australian tourists are #1 market for Bali, but that we have to understand the Australian government's decision and priority, and we fully respect that. Segment coming up deals specifically with this. Lots of thoughts in Australia about Bali and Bali about Australia, because, well, Australia is, if not the #1 market, the #2 market. I don't think we'll be seeing a lot of people coming in from China for a while, and so we have to look at Australia as being the #1 market for people coming in. And according to this article, Australia is getting ready to lift the ban on international travel on November 1st. And that's what I'm going to talk about next. So let's see what that says. And what about Australians? Okay, Bali's Australian tourism blockade could be lifted this weekend. Australians could be cleared to begin traveling to Bali again as soon as this weekend, as Indonesian authorities meeting today, and this is Saturday, to discuss approvals for what was once the island's biggest international tourism market. Okay, so you know I pre-record things before Sunday, and so this is Saturday, so they're meeting today to discuss this. There's been a lot of discussion about why Australia was not on the list of the 19 approved countries. Pak Luhut made this a little more difficult because he said earlier in the week that reciprocal travel would need to be offered for countries to make the cut for Bali's reopening. Australia's new ambassador to Jakarta, Penny Williams, has written to Pak Sandiaga's ministry informing it that Australians on November 1st will be allowed to leave the country and fly wherever they like after effectively being blocked from international travel during the pandemic. But, as I said, with Pak Luhut requiring reciprocal travel arrangements, a concession may be needed for Australians to get the green light to be put on the list. And that's one of the things that will be talked about today. According to Kurleni Ukar, the Deputy for Strategic Policies under Travel and Creative Economy Minister Sandiaga Uno, reciprocal principle becomes one of the requirements. So, I don't know, are they going to be able to bypass this or not? Well, we'll find out. Maybe we'll know by tomorrow, in which case I will put an update at the end of this segment. And interesting to note that New Zealand is one of the countries in the initial intake, and its border's been shut to almost all international travelers. So why is New Zealand on there and Australia isn't? I don't know. We'll see. And according to Alan Joyce, the chief executive of Qantas, if Australians are authorized to return to Bali, direct flights could resume before Christmas, he said. So while Bali is working this out, Thailand, as I mentioned in the previous segment, is becoming the first Southeast Asian nation to open up more broadly. And according to the Prime Minister of Thailand, if we wait until everything is fully ready, we'll be too late. Besides, tourists may choose to go elsewhere, right? It's a race. Will Australians come in anyway as one of the approved countries that can fly directly into Bali? Remember that you have to do the 5-day quarantine? I don't know. I know that from comments here, people have been pretty negative about no, definitely not. But once it opens up, will people do it? A number of questions about that, and that includes the visa and who you get it from and how much it's going to cost and how long it's for. And, well, I haven't seen any figures on that yet. And, of course, in the meantime, Australians can come into Bali just like everybody else has been, using the B211 listing business as the reason for coming into Indonesia and using a sponsor, and the cost is around $3.5 million. That seems to be the average that I've been seeing on social media. More on what's happening around the region. Australia-Singapore travel bubble could be established within next week. PM Morrison. So Australia plans to set up a travel bubble with Singapore, and that would allow quarantine flights to start from November. Quarantine-free flights to start from November. Australian PM Scott Morrison confirmed these plans and indicated that the bubble for fully vaccinated travelers could be in place by November 23rd and would initially apply to international students and business travelers, and tourists could be allowed to enter from December. The Prime Minister said, "We are in the final stages of completing an arrangement with the Singapore government. We anticipate that being able to be achieved within the next week or so, as it would open up more visa class holders coming out of Singapore." And in a Facebook post, Singapore's Prime Minister said he was delighted that Australia will allow entry to visa holders from Singapore, adding that he encouraged the Prime Minister to do so when he visited Singapore in June. Qantas said that flights to Singapore will resume on November 23rd with 330 flights per week. Daily flights will resume on December 18th. And Jetstar will fly from Melbourne and Darwin to Singapore starting on December 16th. Singapore Airlines said yesterday that Airbus A380 will resume flights to Sydney with daily flights from December 1st. And of course there are still issues with borders in Australia and border openings, and well, the politics there are a little beyond me, but I appreciate the lengthy descriptions and explanations from viewers. So thanks all of you Australian folks who are explaining how the situation is unfolding in Australia right now internally. And according to this article, Qantas is launching a new route from Sydney to Delhi on December 6th and bringing forward a resumption of flights from Sydney to Fiji, Bangkok, Phuket, and Johannesburg. The federal government is believed to be considering allowing further quarantine-free travel arrangements with these destinations. There's the 5-day quarantine, right? That's the problem. Well, here's something to do while you're on the 5-day quarantine if you show up. The Bali Provincial Government publishes a travel guidebook for foreign tourists. And so the provincial government is welcoming foreign tourists to Bali with a guidebook on how to travel to the island. The head of Denpasar's tourism agency, Pak Putu Astawa, who we discussed many times, confirmed that the guidebook contains all the travel policies that must be compiled by international tourists during their vacation on the island. And Pakastawa said this will be required reading during the quarantine period. He also noted that travelers may not leave their hotel room during the quarantine period before testing negative from COVID-19 with a PCR test on the 4th day of their quarantine. What can they do while they're in quarantine at the hotel? Well, he said they can spend that time reading the guidebook. Okay, there's something for you to do. Is that going to take 5 days? I don't know. Well, you can always watch Foundation. The Foundation series is excellent. And that's on the Disney Channel. I don't know if your hotel would get that. And, well, Dune, if you're a sci-fi person, Dune is out. Even though we have no planes coming in yet internationally, Pakastawa is confident that visitors will start coming in November and December. He said both airline companies and potential international visitors are preparing themselves for travel in the near future. And Bali is ready to welcome those visitors with implemented prevention protocols that are discussed in the guidebook. Okay, so I'd like to see the guidebook. It'd be nice if they put it online so we could read it beforehand. And I mentioned this issue the other day, but it's worth repeating because I've had some questions about it. Task Force asked Bali-Kepri to maintain mobility of foreign tourists. Don't let travel outside the region. Once you come in on the tourist program, this is not coming in B211 with the business reason, because those people have been traveling everywhere. This is for people coming in on the tourist fly direct into Bali or Rio. So you will not be allowed to leave the island when you get here. You can travel anywhere you want in the island, on the island, but you can't go anywhere else. So you can't go to Lombok, can't go to Java, can't go to Ampat, for example, or the Malukus. So there are restrictions on this program, and so does that make it any less attractive to people who want to come into Bali compared to what's going on in Thailand? Yeah, it's looking less attractive as Thailand is upping their game here. Now the question is, does Indonesia want to switch from the trial run, which was mentioned the other day, the go slow policy? At this point, it doesn't look like it. Are they going to be pushed into something that they don't necessarily want to do by Thailand? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. What about the quarantine? Okay, so nobody wants to do that, although as a few people mentioned, and I mentioned last time, there's some pretty nice little deals on some of these hotel rooms, but I don't know that I want to be in a hotel room for 5 days. But I guess if you really want to come to Bali and you really don't want to go in through Jakarta, well, you're going to put up with the 5 days, I guess. But what about this one? 5 days at sea. Bali seeks to give tourists holiday feel during quarantine. Now this seems to contradict what has been said before. So according to this article, the lackluster response to Bali's reopening has caused the government to think outside the box. How far outside the box are they thinking here? The government wants to allow tourists to spend a 5-day of mandatory quarantine above boats off the coast of Bali, according to Pak Sandiaga Uno. He said his ministry has received requests from tourist and industry players that were interested in a 5-day quarantine at sea, where visitors would be able to enjoy outdoor activities such as diving or swimming. The ministry's Undersecretary for Tourism Products, Rizgi Handayani, said her team was coordinating with the Health Ministry to evaluate and certify ships that have been booked by tourists. The ship's operators say they are ready and have no problem with not docking for 5 days. So I guess you would come into the airport, you would go directly to the harbor, get on one of these boats, and then sail off somewhere and dock and do snorkeling, scuba diving, drinking beer, I don't know, hanging out. According to the CEO of online water transportation marketplace CGO, liveaboard option would revive the marine tourist industry and put thousands of ships back to work. He said this is a great policy. It could help bring back revenue to ship owners. He noted that demand was still low, but that if this was an option, it could be an attractive alternative for foreign tourists as they can feel the vacation ambiance during quarantine. And in this article, our deputy governor said that the provincial tourism agency has set a modest target at around 250 foreigners for visiting Bali this month. Okay, so far we have 0 as far as I know. And right, that's not coming in through Jakarta, that's coming in direct. So far we have none. But as I've said before, and several people have commented, things happen so quickly. Boom, you put out a video and in hours something new develops. It's just crazy these days. We're looking at a relatively low number of people coming in this month, or the government is. Pak Sandiaga said, "We are not opposed to the idea of lifting the quarantine requirement, but for now our focus is on reopening tourism with quarantine." He added that Indonesia would start considering opening the islands of Bali and Riau for vaccinated tourists with no quarantine once the ministry has data to back it up. He said, "We would like to remind everyone that we're in the middle of a pandemic and we want to make sure that health and safety are a priority until the pandemic is over." Time for a wrap-up. The numbers are good, really good, but we need to keep an eye on the numbers and on our behavior because of the possibility of rising cases, especially as the holidays are coming up in another, 6 weeks or so, as Sri Mulyani said in the segment on her. And a lot of activities going on. Everything is moving quickly these days. People are in a hurry to open up. I think partly because the holiday season's coming up, and that's always a good time for tourists, especially in Bali. Traditionally, the Christmas, New Year's season has had a lot of tourists come in, so getting open by then would be beneficial economically for Bali. Australia has been making some big moves forward, and if you were an Australian and you have some new news, always welcome to post it here in the comments, because I like to see it and be able to keep up with what's going on, because Australians getting back are going to be a big part of the recovery. And the segment, the guidebook, I don't know, I'd like to see the guidebook. If somebody sees the guidebook, let us know what it's about, what's in there. I'm really curious. So this is the 24th, 10 days after the opening, and well, we don't have anybody here yet, and as far as I know right now, no plane scheduled to come in. The government has said, I think maybe 250 people will come in this month. That gives us in the next 6 days. There's the question about the quarantine. Will people come into Bali despite the quarantine? But with other countries opening up without a quarantine, that's going to put Bali at a disadvantage. Now, the government's going slow and making sure that they don't have to back up and close down again or lock down or do whatever they're going to do if our numbers start rising, and yeah, I'm in favor of that. I would like to see things get open more quickly. We have foreigners coming in here on the B211A visa using business as a reason for coming in, and they're coming in and they're moving around, and I just don't see the difference at this point between the two groups. That is, the people coming in on the B211A business visa and the people that will be coming in on the B211A tourist visa. And that's in relation to being able to move around Indonesia. So if you come in, I'm not sure why they're going to restrict people coming in on this tourist visa to just Bali. We have other foreigners coming in. Sometimes it seems like the government kind of turns a blind eye to people coming in here on the business visa, but they're coming in. Lots of them have come in. So there's that question, and then the question about how much this visa is going to cost. And so I understand that the government is doing some work with visa agents, and I had a link to a story and I've lost it. But I remember looking at the headlines saying that the government was going to be giving some training or direction to agencies who would be responsible for applying for the visas for people coming in as tourists. Maybe it would be a good idea to put a standard price. I don't know. What do you think? Think there should be a standard price? Okay, so yeah, kind of a slow Sunday. Nothing bad about that, actually. And the weather here, as I said, hot, and it's very overcast today and still windy up here on the north coast. So wherever you are, thanks for viewing. Thanks for the comments once again. Thanks for the thumbs up. And stay safe. Be kind to someone today. If you're here, follow the protocols. If you're not here, well, hang in there. I keep saying that. But maybe by December. See you on Wednesday.